everybody. I'm Sheila Ronning. Welcome. And I'm the founder and CEO of Women in the Boardroom. We work with senior level executive women who are either already serving on corporate boards or who aspire to get onto their first corporate board. We have a proven process to help you get your seat at the table. And if you are interested in serving on corporate boards or more information about us, you can look us up on the internet at www.womenintheboardroom.com. You will also find a link to a video in our membership section that provides a really good overview of who we are and what we do, and also includes a frequently asked questions section. So providing quality content and knowledge about board service is just one of our many offerings. And today's webinar is part 2 of increasing board effectiveness through emotions. And you can watch the last webinar that she did for us on our website as well. We are so happy to have Dr. Lola Gershfeld back to explain the 5 moves to address disconnections in the boardroom. She specializes in board dynamics and has developed the emotional focused approach to board effectiveness. And now, Lola, I'm thrilled you are here with us again today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Sheila. Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here again talking about improving board effectiveness through emotions. I know you don't see what's inside of me, but I'm like jumping out of my seat. In this webinar, we are going to address disconnections on your board before it detrimentally affects your company and the bottom line. As Sheila said, I encourage you to watch our first webinar. We will be reviewing a lot of what we talked about before, but really to get a deeper understanding of emotion, it would be really good to watch it. I love that we are getting a chance to explore how emotion affects board function. You know, for some, this topic may be difficult to talk about or even to accept. We all want to think that we're above emotions. Many may even think that they have full control over emotions, but the research shows otherwise. It's just simply not true. It's similar to advertising. If you ask anybody if advertising works on them, they would say, no, advertising does not work on me. I see advertising all the time. I really don't pay attention to it. But we know that advertising works because it exists. The same is true with emotion. No one wants to admit that emotion affects behaviors and decisions. But we know that it does because there's an immense amount of research shows that it does. What the research shows is that we have an innate need to be connected. And when that connection is broken or compromised, our basic human instinct is activated, affecting our ability to collaborate, innovate, and solve problems together. The research further indicates the main driver of connection and disconnection is emotion. So in order for us to make our board more effective and become more effective ourselves, we must know how to work with emotion. I personally seen incredible results when board members become competent with emotions and know how to create that emotional connection on their boards. And I'm really excited to share it with you today. So I want you to keep an open mind because emotion is so powerful. There's a great quote by Maya Angelou that says, people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So emotions are pretty powerful. In our time together, we'll cover how disconnections occur, provide a few examples of failures and successes, and then get into the 5 moves you can use to reconnect your board. So let's do a quick review on some of the important concepts that we covered. Emotional connection is wired into our brain. It is an ancient and a powerful survival code. We long for emotional connection because it makes us feel safe. And those board members who know how to create emotional connection, they know how to regulate their own emotions and the emotions of their fellow board members. This regulation actually helps them to regain emotional balance, which allows them to stay open-minded, and remain calm during stressful situations. And there's lots of stressful situations in the boardroom. Emotional connection makes the board stronger. It allows the board to work better together, collaborate, and have the confidence they need to explore new opportunities, take healthy risks, and address challenges together. More importantly, emotional connection works as a vaccine against panic and stress, which disrupts our progress. So, what we should really be focusing on today is how detrimental it is when board members get disconnected. An excellent example of this is Men's Warehouse. George Zimmer founded Men's Warehouse in 1973 and stayed as a CEO and the executive chairman until 2011. He then moved solely into the executive chairman's role. Between 2011 and 2013, Zimmer and the board started to have differences, at which point these differences became more and more prevalent and disrupting their board meetings. Now, research shows that it's really not the differences that cause disconnection, it is how you manage these differences. When you are securely connected, these differences don't scare you because you can address these differences in a safe manner. They're just topics, and topics don't define your relationship. When you don't have a secure connection, you approach these differences in a much more aggressive and dangerous way. For example, when Zimmer would disagree with the board, he came across as criticizing, complaining, blaming, becoming aggressive toward the board. And this is understandable because he cares so much about the company. But it is a threat. This type of approach is a threat to anyone's brain. The board, feeling overwhelmed, not understanding how to read his deeper emotions or how much he cared about the company, reacted to that threat by pushing back, defending, distancing, and stonewalling. This let Zimmer and the board get panicked and stressed, triggering a negative cycle of fight and shut down, fight and shut down. This is actually very common for all kinds of boards. The drama is always the same. The powerful emotions, the visceral responses, and the momentum that it just picks up board members and carries the progress off into a vortex, leaving board members feeling angry and upset. So it was really that negative cycle that led the board make a decision and fire Zimmer. But unfortunately, that didn't improve board's performance. The board was still disconnected, which was evident by the results of their decision that came after, or even in the implementation of that decision. When Zimmer left, the board made a decision to acquire Joseph A. Banks for $1.8 million, which not only added more debt, but the merger itself was unsuccessful and tanked their stock price from the mid-60s to the mid-teens. The failure of the merger was blamed on how different these two companies' customer bases were. But in reality, had the board known how to address emotional disconnection from the start, they would have been able to deal with their conflict in a much more um, successful way. You see, conflict is not an issue. Conflict is the inflammation. The virus is emotional disconnection. Emotional disconnection with a group of mammals whose brains are tuned to monitor and to seek connection, see disconnection as a threat. So instead of being accessible, responsive, and engaged that we covered in the previous webinar, the Men's Warehouse board fell into the cycle of complaining, blaming, and criticizing each other, which led them and kept them disconnected. As a result, I'm sure that these directors are very competent, but what they didn't realize that once emotional disconnection is entered into the boardroom, their competence becomes incompetence. If you would ask me a question, you would ask me, what is the one thing that board members don't know? And this is a kind of difficult question, because board members know so much. But if you would ask me, what's the one thing that board members don't know? I would say that board members have no idea on the impact they have on each other. No idea. They don't understand that they are in this mode of survival, and it's a mode that their brain is completely wired into the terms of safety and danger. If you're a bonding mammal, disconnection from those you depend on is a danger cue. And so, for example, board members do not understand how they trigger each other. Think of it when you are really stressed and you get a hug from someone you love. Your whole body responds in a really positive way. That's the power board members have on each other. They provide the same effect on managing stress. Being there for each other, providing the strength and the confidence they need to keep an open mind, take healthy risks, and improve and move their company forward. Of course, it can work in the opposite way, where board members negatively impact each other. I know of a company, for example, where one of the directors falls asleep during board meetings. Now, his lack of engagement and disconnection leads to the ultimate disconnection of the entire board. Well, naturally, we want to ignore that person, right? But the fact is, when we work in groups, our brains monitor connection, and we see disconnection as a danger cue. It hinders our ability to effectively participate. And so your brain is kind of like tuned to that person. Instead of being emotionally involved in the board meetings, you become emotionally disconnected because that bothers you. So, what are some of the other examples of board disconnections? For example, when board members are closed minded, when board members don't contribute ideas or suggestions. You take an example of a public company board with 8 directors, with only 2 people participating. The rest sit in silence. That is a disconnected board. Disconnection occurs when board members don't know how to manage their emotions. It occurs when the CEO is not willing or interested to listen to the suggestions or concerns of its board members. One such example is of a public company board that got into so much trouble that their stock dropped from $260 per share to $27 per share. The CEO was so focused on the mergers and acquisitions that he didn't pay close attention to when board members were voicing their concerns and that he was growing the company too fast and way too soon. Disconnections occur when people dismiss comments or ideas, or when there's a lack of appreciation and recognition. I know it sounds kind of silly, but I know of a director who resigned due to this fact, which was a huge loss for the board because he offered lots of network connections as well as great ideas. And what the research says is that significant disconnections are always and only about one question, the attachment bonding question. Are you there for me? And the question really kind of breaks down into the 3 ideas. Are you accessible to me? Can I reach you? Will you be there when I call? Are you responsive, emotionally responsive to me? Do you get my pain? Do you get my concern? Can you respond to me emotionally? Are you engaged with me? As my fellow board member, can you help me to understand the things I need to make the right decision? Can you be emotionally engaged with me? And what the research shows is that all relationship distress from an attachment point of view results from a no or a maybe answer to that question, to those questions. The brain becomes guarded and suspicious of that relationship, and a disconnection occurs. When we want to reconnect, what we do is we reach. We reach. That's an ultimate strategy. However, when reaching is fueled by anxiety, it comes off as pushing, which often comes off as complaining, criticizing, or demanding. When we push and don't get the response we need, we shut down. So what board members don't understand is when they shut down, that is a threat, and the board will experience it as a threat and as a danger cue, and it will increase their upset. Just like we've seen in a Men's Warehouse, what caused the fight in their boardroom was not disagreement about the strategy or the numbers. It's always about emotional disconnection. So we've seen it in so many companies. And here's some other examples. Teva Pharmaceutical Company with their board squabbles. PIMCO with their poor relationships. The Ferrari board, a public showcase of arguments. The Sanofi board with their huge disconnect in communication between the board and the CEO. VW, with which had all kinds of issues because it's a family board, so you have lots of other attachment problems. Credit Suisse, which was once an amazing company that turned into a disaster and losing their 18 top traders and bankers. Cisco board, which resulted in losing their top 3 people from their R&D executive team, causing much disruption and distress for the whole company. And the list goes on and on. I know that I'm kind of running through these examples fast, but I just want you to get a glimpse just to illustrate how mismanaging disconnections can lead to failures, even in the biggest companies. Board members often blame these conflicts on lack of communication skills, or lack of negotiation skills, or conflict management. Well, the interesting thing about skills is that even if those board members would learn these skills, they wouldn't be able to use them when they were threatened and upset. You cannot use these skills when you can only use these skills when you're calm and in emotional balance. And that's just like the rest of us. That's true. See, the thing with skills, it's often not an acquisition problem, it is an access problem. Key point, disconnections are inevitable. They will happen all the time. Even if you are connected, disconnection will happen. But it is how you manage these disconnections that makes a difference. And I'm really excited to share an example of a board that was able to overcome emotional disconnection and get a better result for their company. Peter McColland opened the gas distribution company Airgas in 1982. By 1990, the company reached $1.5 billion in sales and covering 30% of the market. In 2010, Airgas was under attack. Air Products, their competitor, was attempting a hostile takeover, and it wasn't looking too good. In their persistence, Air Products was able to replace 3 of Airgas directors with their own people, which came as a complete surprise. I mean, that's crazy, right? Imagine yourself sitting on this board that you deeply care about, and suddenly you have your 3 own directors gone and replaced with the enemy on your board. What would you do? How would you react? Naturally, this invoked a lot of emotion, and the board members were practically submerged with stress. A side note, research shows that prolonged stress slows down our cognitive abilities, impairs our social skills, and impacts our decision-making process. So the number 1 priority for board members is to reduce stress so that they can think clearly and work together collaboratively to come up with the next step. The remarkable thing about this case was how quickly Airgas directors were able to regain the emotional balance, which reduced their negative influences of stress and provided the confidence they need to connect with their new directors, which actually brought them over to their side. Did you hear that? I'm going to say it one more time. They connected with their new directors in a way that it actually brought them over to their side. And when the vote came on the merger, the board unanimously voted against it. I mean, to me, that is amazing. That's just incredible. Of course, I don't want to dismiss the fact that the board had really good lawyers and the new directors had fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to protect the company. But just think about it. The power of secure connection allowed the new directors to have an open mind, to evaluate the plan, form an attachment to the company's value, and vote against the merger, to have that confidence to vote against the merger. The Airgas board was able to prevent a hostile takeover from Air Products while their three directors were sitting on their board. I'm telling you that this story, I'm telling you this story, and I get really excited. I have like goosebumps of what an amazing result that this board was able to produce. When we experience stress, the most effective way to, to combat the stress is to turn to people we depend on, to pull them close and accept their care and support. Of course, you can turn to your family, to your spouse, but nothing works better than to turn to your own board members. This increases positive hormones in your body and reduces stress, which improves our cognitive abilities. Remember how I said that board members impact each other? This is a perfect example of that. The Airgas board was excellent at this. So, what were some of the things that they did that was really effective? They provided information openly. They let everyone speak without blame or judgment and provided care and support when someone needed it. When the new directors talked separately in their own groups at first, the Airgas directors responded with patience and respect. That is the act of empathy. They let them ask tough questions and then provided thoughtful and respectful answers. The CEO met with the new directors individually, telling them the history of Airgas and forming an attachment to the company's value system, their mission, and their vision. This created and furthered their emotional connection and bond with each other by involving and engaging their new directors in their board meetings, which pulled a whole board together. I had the privilege of interviewing David Stout, one of the directors at Airgas, and he shared with me the behind the scenes dynamics, which I really excited that will be published in a short form article in the November issue of the Corporate Board Member Magazine. When addressing disconnections, you don't need to change everything on your board. You need to change the core organizing elements in the interaction. The core organizing elements are how board members deal with their emotions and how the emotional signals they send to each other, and how these signals help board members to either lead them to disconnection by pushing each other away, or how they create a secure connection by pulling them close. So, what is exciting about this research on emotional connection and bonding, and all the research on the neuroscience happening right now, is that it provides us with a clear map on how board members can actually deal with their emotion and how they can send clear emotional signals to each other to create that positive interactional pattern on their board. This roadmap is summarized in a three-stage process. And we covered this in detail in our last webinar, but I'll quickly review it so that everyone can get on the same page. The first stage is de-escalation stage. We identify the pattern of interaction and the steps that are causing the negative cycle. The most common cycle starts with one person complaining, criticizing, blaming, and the other backing off, distancing, and stonewalling. One person demands, the other person withdraws, and they get caught in this negative cycle. In this stage, we create safety by making sure that board members understand that no one has to be the bad guy. You're not bad people, you just haven't understood emotional connection, and you end up disconnected from each other. So the goal is to identify the pattern of interaction, what's happening with them, without blaming or judging, and keeping the brain calm and engaged. The next stage is restructuring the pattern. In this stage, we help board members create a positive interactional cycle where they learn to reach for each other in a way that pulls them close. In this stage, we help board members not to shut down, but instead talk about their vulnerabilities and the triggers that is causing them to push for the connection or shut down. And the last stage is we consolidate. The board develops a better understanding of the relationship. And every few minutes throughout the stage, we validate and help them feel safe. Safety is the key. People will not become vulnerable unless they feel safe. And I just want to say a few words about vulnerability. Talking about vulnerability, I think has coming a much more accepted in our society. And there's also a lot of research that has been on this topic. For example, research shows that when people become more vulnerable with each other, they work better together because it pulls them close. Further, research shows that leaders who share their vulnerabilities become much more effective than those that do not. A great example of this is Daniel Vasella, the CEO and the former chairman of Novartis Pharmaceutical. Having a tough upbringing, Vasella was able to overcome these challenges by sharing his difficult moments in life, which again pulled people closer to him and gave him the confidence and the strength he needed to build a strong and a successful company. Another example is Facebook. Facebook holds its conferences, annual conferences, for the employees and invite people like Brene Brown. You know, she's a researcher on vulnerability. And she talks about vulnerabilities at their conferences. And I love what Brene says. She says that vulnerability is the birthplace of creativity, innovation, and change. So when you become vulnerable, your mind opens up to new possibilities. So through those three stages, when we help board members to talk about their vulnerability, they remove blocks that connects them closer together and changing the trajectory of the relationship, which impacts the productivity and results. You know, when I talk to board members, they love the word trust. They relate to it. They want to understand and they want to trust each other. Trust develops from a secure bond. The main element in a secure bond is emotional responsiveness. You know, emotional responsiveness and performance go hand in hand together. The better the emotional responsiveness is on your board, the better your board performs. So throughout the three stages, the goal is not just to make board members nice to each other. The goal is to create bonding moments so that board members can experience emotional responsiveness. Being able to reach somebody emotionally, that is being accessible. Create emotional connection, being responsive, and trust that you can engage with them emotionally. Being engaged is what defines a secure bond, and that's what will give trust to board members. When you don't have a secure bond, you end up pushing for this connection, become very agitated, monitoring all the time, and this is incredibly distracting. This is what takes away your focus from being collaborative, creative, and addressing challenges together. To create that emotional responsiveness through the three stages, you'll see me do 5 basic moves over and over again. A side note, Sue Johnson is a researcher and the developer of emotional focus therapy. I'm using her moves and her analogy because it really connects to me. We both dance Argentine tango. When you dance Argentine tango, you improvise. You don't learn a routine like in a ballroom dancing or ballroom tango, but you have basic moves that you use over and over again to improvise your dance and create that emotional connection with your partner that you need and that speaks to you. So it touches people's hearts and it touches people's souls. If you watch the Argentine tango, you'll see that the best performers are those that are emotionally in tune with each other. I think that relates to boards. The act of collaboration is like a dance. The emotional responsiveness are the steps in the dance. The better the emotional responsiveness, the more connected your board members will be, and the more smooth and effective their collaborations become because it creates this amazing energy needed for them to be motivated to work better and solve difficult problems together. So when board members experience this, they experience this personal fulfillment like never before. And just like with the tango, the moves may be overwhelming at first, so you might want to practice these moves in the smaller settings, such as your committee members or just with those board members that have a difficult time in connecting, maybe outside of the board meeting. You can also practice these moves with the family members. I mean, when I was learning these moves, my family was the lab. And I cannot tell you how grateful they are now. I mean, it was difficult for them, but now that they learned about emotions, our family get togethers are much more enjoyable, and people just love to be together. So another way to do this is you want to maybe enroll your chairman or the lead director who have stronger influences and can help you in case you get stuck. And one thing that I would like to mention that if you are the one who is disconnected, you can still apply these 5 moves, but you need to have a lot of practice. So your emotional muscle is strong. It doesn't go all the way down into that panic and get overwhelmed. So what are these 5 moves? Okay. Move 1, you stay in the present. This is a present oriented process. It is about identifying the present emotion and determining the steps that create that emotion. To do that, I ask questions like, what just happened here? Could I stop you for a minute? What's happening right now? So in this move, the goal is for board members to become aware of what is happening with their emotion. Emotion is what drives the dynamics in the boardroom. To do this move, you want to pay attention to the change that has happened in that moment. For example, one person is talking and the other turns away, or their face becomes tight, or their tone of voice changes. You may also notice the change in the content, going from a conversation to an accusation, complaining, blaming, becoming demanding. You want to pay attention to the change of the demeanor. Do they become angry or disengaged? So identifying the change in the moment, you can catch the moment when that change occurs. Now, sometimes the interaction is going so fast that it's hard to catch right that moment. You can just make a note, a mental note of the change, and then you can bring it up a little later. So when people are a little bit calmer, and you do this as though you are rewinding the steps, just like you would rewind a video in slow motion. So when you rewind the steps, you want to talk slowly so it doesn't become overwhelming for people. What you're trying to identify is the emotion that caused the change. It may be a frustration, anger, anxiety, disappointment, fear, sadness, shame, or whatever emotion that caused the change. Move 2. In move 2, you take the elevator down. In this move, you explore the deeper emotion that drives the change. What caused the reaction? What is hurting them? What is threatening their connection? Remember, we are wired for connection. So something is blocking that connection for them. Something has happened, and you are trying to identify it. The goal in move 2 is identifying what is blocking them and what is threatening them. One of the most common blocks is fear. And I'm not talking about physical fear. I'm talking about the emotional fear. The fear of appearing incompetent. The fear of being embarrassed. The fear of losing status. The fear of feeling shamed. Fear of appearing weak or needy. Fear of making a wrong decision. And there are all kinds of fear. And what the research shows is that overwhelmingly, the science of emotional connection sees fear as the most damaging to human functioning. So when we take the elevator down, the main question is, what is your biggest fear? And when we can express it and share it with our board members, we will be able to receive that care and support we need to know that we are not alone, that we can address these challenges together, and we can regain our emotional balance. To get to the bottom of it, we reflect the emotion, rephrase, we dissect the emotion. We're really trying to slice it and dice it so that they can slow down and name that fear. We do this over and over again and going over the step in the interactional process and identifying the emotion that is created in each step. I'll give you an example. I worked with a board where their CEO and one of the directors were disconnected. So in move one, we identified the step where the disconnection occurred. And disconnection occurred when the CEO would send an email and that director would not respond. The CEO then sends another email and the director would not respond. So the CEO waits a couple of days, sends a couple more emails, and then she shut down. I know it sounds simple, and it took us a while to get to those steps because the content gets so infused in the interaction that you have to slow it down to the simplest things. So in order to strip everything off and just identify the steps and what is happening when the disconnection occurs. Once we identify that, we do move two. We take the elevator down and working through her emotions, we identified that her deeper emotion was shame. Together, we identified that the place where she goes to before she shuts down is that I am not good enough CEO. And then she shuts down. See, remember the shutdown occurs when people become overwhelmed with their emotion. So in her case, the feeling of shame, I'm not good enough, is pretty heavy feeling. And it is overwhelming for the brain, for the survival, right? So it shuts down. To ask people to go deeper may feel uncomfortable at first, but once they experience the impact it has and how it pulls people closer together, it will be worth it for them and you to take that risk. So once board members are able to identify their underlying emotion, we create a new emotional signal. Move 3. We set up an enactment, a process of one person sharing that deep emotion with the other. To do this, you ask one person to physically turn and share what they have experienced, what they have discovered, what they have experienced, what they feel. Now, this could be one of the hardest moves because the person needs to share their vulnerabilities, which could be alarming for the brain. But with enough safety and knowing that board members care about each other, board members want to be closer together, they want to work together, they will take that risk. And you can do this by practicing with them several times, just you and that person looking at each other. That is why we dissect emotion, we manage it in so many different ways, so it doesn't feel so threatened. So in my example, I asked the CEO if she can turn and share with the director that what she has discovered, what happens to her before she shuts down. And sometimes, people will say, no, I don't want to tell him. And, I would say, could you just turn and tell him, it's hard to even tell you how I feel in the moment I shut down. See, on the informational processing point of view, the other person heard every word. But it's not about information. It's about emotional engagement. So in my case, in my example, the CEO does turn and tells the director, when I don't get a response, I cannot even tell you how bad I feel. I feel like I'm not a good enough CEO. So the goal in move 3 is to create a new emotional experience, which turns into a new kind of cue on a different kind of emotional level with the other person. So to kind of summarize these 3 moves is we reflected the present process, we've explored and deepened the emotion, And when we created an emotional, an enactment, and now we're going to create a new emotional signal. Move 4. In this move, we get board members to relate to their own experience. We process the enactment. We get them to relate to their own emotions and get them experience the emotion of the other person. So I asked the CEO, how was it for you to share your deep emotion with the director? And she says, it feels good. It feels a hell of a lot better than running and putting up 3,000 feet walls and hiding all the time. It feels good. I don't know why I never learned to do this. And then I asked the director, and he says, I like it. I didn't know how, I didn't know that you felt that way. You're an amazing CEO. There are times when I just get overwhelmed with all your emails and it just freaks me out, but I don't want you to feel like you're a bad CEO. Ah, that is what we want. That is called a bonding moment. She takes the risk of sharing her vulnerabilities. He responds to her by reassuring, which pulls these two people closer together. And when people can't respond positively, you need to help them. This is a new for them. It's like, they may become overwhelming. Sometimes I might work with a board member individually and separately just to get them more familiar with the language of emotion, comfortable of them feeling that emotion, becoming more aware of it, and identifying the emotion, practicing the enactment before it actually happens in the boardroom. See, remember, disconnections usually happen between two people at a time. You never have a case where everyone is fighting at the same time. But the thing is with disconnections, even small disconnections, they impact the whole board function. I had, for example, two board members sitting on one same board. One shamed the other one right in front of everybody for going after his company. That created such a big disconnect that the 3-day board meeting was completely useless. Depending on how safe you feel, you can engage others by asking them what it was like for you to experience the enactment and if they can share. See, the goal is to help them appreciate and recognize the risk that these two people took and how it pulls them together. And this is really important for board members to start having positive interactions and move them into the secure attachment where they can get into the habit of sharing their vulnerabilities in a new emotional channel. The goal is to get board members to feel that the answer to the bonding questions, are you accessible? Are you responsive? Are you engaged? Is a resounding yes. And I say feel because this is an experiential process. The change happens through emotional experience. You got to feel it. Move 5, we integrate, we validate, and we recognize. I focus on the moment and I say, wow, look at what you did. You just shifted out of this pattern that controlled your relationship for years. You were able to be honest with each other and share difficult emotions. In this move, it is really important to provide the support and encouragement board members need. Usually, board members are pretty good at taking strategic and professional risks, right? But this kind of a risk is new to them. So I'm validating and giving them the message. Yes, you can understand emotional connection. Yes, emotional safety makes sense. Yes, you know how to work with emotion. And most importantly, I want them to experience that amazing and rewarding feeling of being emotionally connected. Working with emotion is like learning a new language. It is like learning a new dance, a new style, a new way of working together. Once you learn how to approach the disconnection with these 5 moves, you'll have the most amazing arena for change. I think I said before um, that I get more individual change when I work with the whole board than when I work with individual board members because board members grow each other. They pull each other closer, and nothing motivates people more like emotional connection. To wrap up, I'd like to share a short story. There's a place in California called Death Valley. Death Valley is the hottest, driest place in America. Nothing grows there. Nothing grows there because it doesn't rain. In the winter of 2004, it rained in Death Valley. 7 inches of rain fell over a very short period of time. And in the spring of 2005, there was a phenomenon. The whole floor of Death Valley was covered with flowers. What it proves is this: Death Valley isn't dead, it's dormant. Right beneath the surface are these seeds of possibilities waiting for the right conditions to come about. And when those conditions happen, life is inevitable. I feel the same applies to boards. When board members are emotionally connected, change is inevitable. They bloom, they become more motivated, collaborate better, share information openly without any hesitation, come up with new ideas, and solve challenges together. I see this happen right in front of my eyes. Longing for emotional connection is wired into our brain. When we feel connected, we feel more valued, appreciated, and supported. All of which perpetuates our motivation, development, and progress. In conclusion, I want to say that yes, emotion can be scary to work with, but with learning these 5 moves, you can improve your board function in a lasting and significant way. It won't happen with one board meeting, but employing these five moves over and over again, you will start to change the music. You'll start to change the dynamics of your board. You start to help board members to change the mode from complaining, criticizing, and blaming into the mode of caring, supporting, and encouraging, and helping each other succeed. You'll create a more secure bond with your board members, and as a result, you improve your company. I hope that this webinar has been helpful to you. For more information, please visit our website, level5executive.com, and also womensintheboardroom.com. I think we have a few minutes for questions, right, Sheila?
We do, yes, we do. A couple questions have come in. One, Lola, at some point, I'd be interested in you discussing emotional connections of the board with management.
Boards are made of humans. Management are made of humans. So everything applies the same way, the same 5 moves, the same 3 stages. So I encourage you to be much more familiar and employ it there as well.
Thank you. And then, okay, so as you were talking, and it was such a great presentation, by the way, do men respond differently than women to the emotional connection in the boardroom?
Mm. Sheila, there's evidence, of course, in general, that men report to be more avoidant than women in our society. I mean, after all, we have taught men the boy code, right? That men are supposed to not need people. They can do everything on their own.
Right.
They're supposed to be competent, strong, focused on performance. And if, you need, and if a man needs someone to help, they're looked at like a wimp. But we need to change that. And I think that is changing. In my experience working with men, and I remember that at the beginning people would say, you can't use emotional focused approach with men. You can do it with women because women like to talk about emotions. That's totally wrong. In fact, what I see that men are usually the ones that will take the risk and talk about the emotion. And I think that's because we create safety. We don't blame. And that's a huge safety factor. We know how to help men understand their relationship, and they like it because there's a map to follow in creating these close connections. And when we get down to vulnerabilities, really, men and women aren't different. We all are the same. We all want to be valued, connected, appreciated, and supported.
Mm-hmm.
Men want to have the same and have the same emotions as women.
Yep. I think that men are way more sensitive than we give them credit for.
Yes.
Um, Another question. Can you speak a little bit more about how shame interferes with connection?
That's a tough one. because normally our response to difficult emotion is we hold them, we go into them slowly, helping to still them, right, in order for people with reflection, with soothing, with slowing down, and helping them to really talk about emotion. But shame is a little tricky. Emotion comes from the Latin word immover, to move. And every emotion has an action tendency associated with it. The action tendency behind shame is to hide and withdraw. And what we're trying to do is to create engagement in the boardroom, right? So you basically look at shame, and if you are engaging a withdrawer, and if you're saying, will you share your fear? And if they say, no, I won't because I feel like ashamed, you basically have to contain. You don't push more. You give them another frame of reference. You say, it's so brave of you to start to share these things, and it shows how strong you are. So often we contain shame because the impulse behind shame is to hide. The way I see shame is basically about fears, about your own unacceptability of self. And the most powerful antidote to shame is the approval of those that are close to you. For example, in your personal life, it may be your spouse or your parent or your sibling. In the boardroom, it is your board members. As a consultant, I have a 21 light bulb to shine into somebody's pit of shame. The people who are close to you have a stadium floodlight. So if the person can talk about their fears, about their failures, and the other person can give that floodlight of approval, that creates an amazing change in their personal development. Remember with my example, the CEO thought that she was not good enough. And when the director said that she was an amazing CEO, that gave her a lot of confidence. That is a stadium floodlight right there of approval, and just like helps her to move forward and become a stronger leader.
Yeah, good stuff. So what else is important in creating effective board dynamics?
There are tons of other things that are really um, important in the boardroom. We talked about, are you there for me? Can we reach? Can we pull each other close? But I think there are other things that really important is company's vision, mission, and core values. This is what really provides the board with a guideline of making sure that decisions are consistent and the company is moving toward the right direction. So that if one board member becomes sidetracked, for example, the securely attached board can turn into that person's need and provide them with the necessary care and support to get them back on track. I have, for example, a good friend who served on a board where their CEO wanted the company to invest in an organization where his wife had a stake in it. Now, after the board evaluated the proposal, it was clear that it wasn't in the best interest of the company to make that investment. But they knew that the CEO had an attachment to the deal because of his wife. The board never said yes, and the board never said no. Instead, they slowly guided the CEO to make the right decision. Granted, it took a year and a half for them to do that, but they never lost that secure connection with the CEO, and it made their connection even stronger. Such things happen, and they will happen, and they won't get the company into trouble because you know that somebody's got your back. I love this image. I'm having this image that it's like the board is a tether that holds you safe. You are on a zip line, right? And just because you have this tether, you have a safe connection with your board. You can go wahoo across the chasm, and you can let go, and you can feel the thrill. You can explore what it feels like to hang over the chasm. That's the image I have of a securely attached board. So there are other elements, of course, and the really effective board is the one that can integrate the vision, the mission, and the core values along with emotional connection and create that safe haven and a secure place for board members to work together.
Excellent. Well, that was our last question that we had come in. Um, Really great presentation. Thank you so much. Thanks for
Thank
all of
you, Sheila.
you who are watching the webinar for joining in. And of course, if you're interested in more information on women in the boardroom, check us out on our website listed here. to find Lola. All of her contact information is here as well. But thanks again, Lola. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Have a great day.